It seemed shorter than the first service. Well, just one more plug for the weekly video. I gave you a little bit of an assignment, and that's where we start this morning. I put this question in your outline, and I want to encourage you to turn to 1 Corinthians 10, 14 through 17. But then I kind of modified the question. I hope you've got some thoughts for me. How is it that we might participate in idolatry? I know that sounds like kind of like an opportunity. That's not what it's intended to say. So maybe something like this. What are some modern day idols we find ourselves wrapped up in? Got some, what's that? Cell phone. Yeah, someone did that in the first service. Cell phone. Well, one at a time. What? Video games. No one's going to mention anything dark and deadly, I know, but we'll go with this for a while. What's that? Money. Money. All right, getting close to ching. Okay. Other things?
Facebook.
Facebook. Really? Okay. Yeah. What would I know? You guys know me. Huh?
The need for speed. There you go.
Yeah, the need to hurry up. Wow, that is on my list. It's not the one I'm going to share this morning. Idolatry and communion is kind of an odd combination. I know that, but I didn't pick it. Paul did. Paul was sniffing up something in the culture that needed to be said to the early believers. And I think because of the relationship to communion on a communion table and the sacrifice on an altar, there were some places at which there was a little bit of a cross-section of what was going on. And so I believe that communion and idolatry wants to say a couple things to us. He says, therefore, dear friends, in fact, he's going to call them two things, and I think this is significant. Therefore, dear friends, flee from idolatry. With deep emotion, therefore, in all that he's saying, flee from idolatry. You might want to circle the word flee. That's the verb. It's an imperative verb. You must be gone from that. Now, in the first century, and we're gonna get there. This is a word that needed to be shared. Okay, fleeing from idolatry, and we're gonna do a little more work this morning, just to dig a little bit deeper into what the idolatries might be in our own lives and in our own hearts. So this is all influenced by two things. In the first century, idolatry was seen in pagan feasts, because there were pagan temples. And as I said in my video thing, since there's not a lot of pagan temples in Valley Springs, however, there are pagan locations in which people worship in Calaveras County. But since that's not prevalent, what was going on? So the temples were a place in which people made sacrifices, they did things, so that they could somehow get in touch with God. And these feasts were actually quite cultural. I guess the best way to talk about them is they were like a county fair. Everybody got involved. Okay? And this Christian church that was growing was trying to find a way to be who they needed to be without getting too wrapped up in the world. And Paul had to say, this is where it divides. Flee from that. The second piece to this is every time they got done with the feast, several days of festival, they had all this stuff in the temple, all this grain, all this sacrifice meat. And so at the end of the feast, the people from In-N-Out Burger would show up in the truck and load it all up and then sell it as burgers to people that came to their shops, right? And no one had any idea that which was used for evil was now being sold in the marketplace. And so once again, there was this whole common understanding of something that was just in its own way just seeping into the Christian culture. Or I could actually put it this way: in the first century, Christian culture hadn't found its way out from underneath the influence of the world that they lived in. All right? There's a modern correlation to this. I would say idolatry now is trust in and glory to another. Anything other than God. When you got something really important to do and you're thinking, no, God's too impractical for this. Right? So we're going to do it our way. That's trusting in something other than God. And when you thought that you really pulled off something really cool, and you're going, woohoo, man, was I good at that? That's glory to yourself. Even as a Christian, and not giving glory to God for what God did in your life. You see the correlation? And so part of what happens with idolatry in the ancient and in the modern context is that it can be intentional and unintentional. You see, some people are just covering all their bases. They're going to work out of their common sense, and they're going to work out of God as it pleases them. Or they're going to work out of their money as their security, and then they're going to have security in God. Or they're going to work out of their gifted influence, or they're going to let God influence. If they have power, they're going to use their power to the degree that they can, and then they'll trust in God. See how that works? But you see, some people are unintentional. They don't know the power of their influence, or their money, or their gifting. And so they're living off of that instead of living off God. In the first century, it would be very common for a Christian farmer to get his big bag of seed, and on his way out to the field, he lived in the village, he walked out, he would stop at a place in which pagans worshipped, or in which there was a temple. Oh, he's doing just fine. No problem. Oh, maybe. Love all that hair. Isn't that amazing? Well, my kids were bald until they were 7. Mess. But anyway. He would walk out to the field and stop at a local temple shrine and put the seed on the altar and offer it to a fertility god, Christian man. Then he'd pick up his seed, take it out to the field, sow the seed, and then, oh God, Jehovah, bless. You see? And had no concept. Just that's how they were raised. And I've got this sense today that the church has kind of been raised like that. Sometimes if it's something really important, man, you're praying. But sometimes if it's really important, I don't want God's hands on this yet. I want to control it. See, I'm going to raise my kids, right? I'm going to do these things. I'm going to procure that job. We're not so sure we want to go in that direction. So 2 things about communion. Here's the second thing that he tells the people. He says, I speak to sensible people. Judge for yourself what I say. There was a problem in Corinth. The people thought that they knew everything. They thought that they had it all, you see. And Paul's saying, I'm going to speak to sensible people. If you circle that word and make your bubble big enough and write the word in there, teachable. Sensible means teachable. I'm always amazed at how unteachable Christians are who think they know everything. And it's really, it's really amazing. In about the first 20 years of doing ministry, I also observed something else. That when I was working in a congregation of people, I'd have plumbers and firefighters and roofers and lawyers and mechanics, and I would never have suspected that I knew how to do their jobs, because I was a pastor. But all those people knew exactly how to do my job. What up with that? How did that happen? It's not sensible. It's not teachable. You see, there's something going on here. And then he says this, is not the cup of thanksgiving for which we give thanks, a participation in the blood of Christ. You see, communion, undiluted by our worldly idolatries, make us a fountain of thanksgiving. So you see, Christ gave himself for us thankfully, and we receive from Christ thankfully. God, in abundance and generosity, thankfully gives to you from this very cross. And we thank him for giving to us. So much so that the early Christians picked up the Passover saying, and they would say, "Blessed art thou, O God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine." This is the cup of thanksgiving. You see, we've got it kind of backwards in the church today. We can often, if I were to talk to Christians, or when Christians come into my office, I hear this so much. That believers believe at times that their greatest shortcoming is that they don't feel bad enough for all the things they do wrong. You know, I just want to change this. They come around, I'm just so ashamed of myself, and I'm just so, and Paul is trying to say here that we don't celebrate God enough. It's not about you getting it right. It's about Christ having gotten it right. We under-celebrate what God is doing. We need to be talking about what God is doing and not what we aren't doing, what we aren't capable of. We need to be lifting up God and saying, wow, am I, when you really blow it and you just hang your head and you say, God, forgive me. I am so thankful that you have covered everything in my life. Now, before, and after. And I'm going to live in that celebration. I'm going to celebrate God. The other word here, thanksgiving, the other word here in verses 15 through 16a, participation. There's a downside to participation. And the downside is this. He says you can't pick up the cup and you can't pick up idolatry at the same time without diluting what's in the cup. You know, you're on a long trip and you got one of those big, 122-ounce sodas. It takes a winch to just drink from it. But you got that sitting there on the dashboard of your car or whatever. By the time you get to the end of the trip, it's all diluted. The ice, it's tepid. It's not cold anymore. You can't taste the soda, which you probably shouldn't be drinking anyway. But all of that, it gets diluted. And that's why Paul has put communion next to idolatry and says, don't dilute the life that God gave you. Get maximum strength. Let go of the things that you think are helping you. Don't suffer greatly for it. Jesus died on the cross. You can't die on the cross for your own sins. Give that up. Celebrate his thankfulness and move on. The word participation is where we get the word koinonia, or community. If we have more community with the idols in our lives, we have less community with God. Paul's drawing a line in the sand and says that it's time to separate yourself from these things that are separating you from God. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the service. Finally then, he says this, and is not the bread we break a participation in the body of Christ? Because there is one loaf, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one loaf. So thanksgiving is in the cup, and unity, this is powerful, church, unity is in the loaf. Everyone reaches in and grabs from one broken loaf. And everyone that eats of that loaf is one body together. God is putting us together as a team, as a family, as a people. And that's powerful. The bread is coming together, and so they would say, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, King of the universe, who created bread, the fruit of the earth." Now there's an upside in participation as well, and I've saved that for this verse. Because not only should we not participate with idols, we have this opportunity, because we are unified, to participate in what God is doing. Jesus said, pick up your cross. Participate in the sufferings of Jesus, and you will find joy. A church that seeks to ease the sufferings of Christ on themselves will only dilute themselves. They will ease their joy, they will ease their peace, they will ease everything else. But to be allowed to be hit full force with the suffering, pick up your cross. Paul said in Galatians 2:20, we are crucified with Christ. We are no longer alive, but it is Christ in us who lives. Does Christ live in you? Is there a reasonable evidence or manifestation for the Christ life? Is God writing God's story in your heart? Not just here in church or when you're in Bible study or someplace, but when you're at work or you're dealing with that neighbor that's hard to deal with. Whatever it is Christ in that? Hey, there's a really cool illustration that I ran into this week. I don't know if you're like me, but I'm always amazed at those people that set up dominoes. You know, they'll set up a whole room full of them. They click one, and you know, it takes 4 days to set it up, and it's done in about 40 seconds. Right? So it's kind of a fruitless. It's kind of crazy, but I read this article, and this was amazing. Check this out. A guy named Lauren Whitehead. He's a physicist, mathematician. Any physicists, mathematicians? Anyone pass bonehead math in high school? A couple? Yeah, there you go. All right. Maggie's husband. Okay, great. Woohoo! We got it. So here's the deal. He found out that if you take a 2-inch domino, regulation size, and you push it against the next domino, and that domino is 3 inches, it falls over. Yeah. This is going to get better. Trust me.
Straight through.
If you take a 3-inch domino and push it against a 4.5-inch domino, it falls over. And if you take a 4.5-inch domino, well, you get the point, right? The little guy has just enough energy to push the bigger domino. So here's what I'm interested in. You get down to domino 18. That's like 18. The 18th domino can knock over the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Now that's not too great because it's already leaning, right? Okay, so it gets a fudge factor. Check this out. The 23rd domino, 23 dominoes. This isn't like setting up a whole bunch of, we're going to have this up in about 7 minutes. The 23rd domino knocks over the Eiffel Tower, and the 28th domino knocks over the Empire State Building. So why is this in the sermon? Well, I think it's kind of cool, but also there's 2 points. You see, what often happens is not only do we fail to be thankful people, we fail to be a unified people. Every one of us could see ourselves as 2-inch dominoes, and I'm not going to do today because I ain't got nothing. But you've got everyone in the room pushing against you, pushing against the big guy. Do you get that? You see, God wants to do something powerful in a unified body if we're not just, the last to get to church and the first to leave. If we actually let God write God's story in our heart, and then something powerful happens. If you do little things like they're big things, God will do big things like they're little. You want the big thing in your life that you can't knock over? Then do the first little thing now. And the next little thing. And the next thing you know, you're chucking over the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Even if it's not leaning. Isn't that great? See, that's what God wants to do in your heart. Now, here's the other thing. And I really want you to get this because this is real important. Conversely, there are those in our body who think all they need is their little stinking 2-inch domino and they're going after the Leaning Tower of Pisa yesterday. Well, good luck with that because you're all by yourself. You don't get there until the 18th or the 23rd or the 28th domino. I'm going to ask 30 people next Sunday to step up and join the wild side. Now, if that frightens you, then I'm sure there's something else you can do next Sunday. But I don't think you want to miss this. It's going to be crazy. But that's when something begins to happen. When you can picture the team of people, not your broken hallelujah trying to change the world, but you grabbing people onto teams. So what are you leaning on? How do you lean on your own understanding? What's going on? What is the idol that is diluting and mixing and making your life impure? Maybe you never heard anything like this, and so intentionally or unintentionally, you're hearing this for the first time. So let me tell you mine. And it came in 2 steps. You know, the problem with this preaching thing is that once I get to the message in the middle of the week, God's going to bother me with it and say, are you going to learn anything from this? And so I came to it and I said, you know what my idol is, God? He says, no, yes, but do you know? And I said, yes, I'm the responsible one. I'm the one that makes all the stuff get done. And, you know, I'm running here, I'm running there, I'm kind of, you know, making sure that everything happens. And I'm telling you this, and I'm thinking this, and God, for about 72 hours, God says, and? See, I thought I was down to the bottom of it. Why do you do that, Jeff? So here's the sick. Oh, here, great, our kids are wonderful. So here's the sick thing about Pastor Jeff. Sick as his secrets. Here's the deal. I'm trying to protect my image in this church. I'm trying to make sure that my reputation as a pastor is right. I'm thinking at 63 years old, had a birthday last week or whatever it was, that maybe I should be thinking about my legacy and I want my church to look like I want my church to look like. And God says, I thought it was my church. Oh boy, I thought I was going to get fired. I was looking for lightning bolts. So I'm not telling you this to get your attention. I'm going to ask the worship team to make their way. I'm not telling you all this to get attention or even draw attention to myself. I'm telling you this because anyone who lives like this is as sick as their secrets. And so I outed myself just now, about 2 minutes ago, and I'm thinking it might be a good exercise for you. So here's one other thing that I want you to know. Our idols are basically this. They're our B plan. If things aren't going just right, we've got a B plan in our back pocket. So here's the thing. I know we're good. I got 9 minutes. I don't need anyone to stand up and tell me what the B plan is. You already know what that is. God's sinking that into your heart. I need to give you an opportunity. We're going to come to this beautiful table. The kids are going to share with us with the grapes. We're going to break the bread. But invariably, undoubtedly, God's arms of love want to surround us as we come forward. Just going to give you an opportunity to come and say, I've got an idol that I need to get rid of before I come back to the table. So I'm just going to give you, I'm up here, I'm going to turn around here in a moment. I'm going to give you an opportunity to bring your fear, your doubt, your idol, your B plan, and just bring it right up here. And then we'll pray together, send you back to your seat, and then, clear of that, we'll take communion together. Okay?